Um, so am I sharing my screen then, Laura, and then running the slideshow that way?
So is it you or Julia that has the presentation?
We both
Because
have it.
Julia is host, so Julia should be able to share the presentation now.
Okay, well, she's just sent me the most recent version and I can share it. So let me just.
Julia, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Can you share your screen, or if not, you can give host privilege to John.
Okay.
I can share my screen. So
Okay, great. Yeah.
do you see the first slide there now?
Yes. Yeah.
Super. Okay, so then I'm going to make it full screen here.
Yep.
Okay, super.
Perfect.
I think we're underway here. All right. So thanks for this opportunity to share some of the work that Julie and I did this past summer. We'll start with just a bit of an intro and background and rationale for this project. And we're going to tag team this. Oh, what we didn't do is have Julia introduce herself yet. So let's stop and do that first here. So Julia, you just joined us. So can you do a quick intro of yourself?
Sure. So I'm Julia. I'm a second-year Doctor of Veterinary Medicine student at the Atlantic Veterinary College, which is on Prince Edward Island. I did my undergraduate degree at Mount Allison University in biochemistry. I think I'd like to be a mixed animal veterinarian, and I had a really great summer and learned so much from the different care providers working in the North. So really excited for you guys to hear about the research.
Super, thanks, Julie. All right, so Scott and Jordy did a great job earlier about talking about the integral role that dogs play both currently in the North, but also historically and for generations. Really awesome presentation. However, many of you know that a lot of remote northern communities have limited or no access to veterinary care. Vets Without Borders actually did a study a couple of years ago that enumerated the number of communities with over 100 families in the 3 territories and found over 50 communities that were outside of where the vet clinics actually exist. And so clearly that represents some amount of need. We sort of did a little bit of something similar to that this past summer as well, but we'll get into that later. Now, there's a lot of great organizations out there, and some of you are with us today, that have attempted to address this problem by holding temporary vet clinics or animal care services in these northern communities. And certainly that helps, but it's not really a sustainable system. And there's been limited coordination of these activities as well. And this is one of the reasons I'm really encouraged by this summit, because we're getting together, we're talking, and hopefully that'll lead to better collaboration and cooperation. Up to now, though, there's really been a problem of we don't know which communities are partnered with which organizations, what are they doing, when are they doing it, and that was one of the main reasons for doing this project. So I wrote a proposal to get some summer student funding, and that led to Julia spending her summer answering these questions to try and fill in this gap. The first one, what organizations and individuals are currently working in Northern Canada to provide these animal care services? What services are they actually providing? What species of animals are benefiting? And where and when are they providing these services? And so I'm going to give it to Julia now to describe exactly what she did over the summer.
Thanks, John. So in order to address the gaps in knowledge that we spoke about in the previous slide, we set out to create a database of different organizations as well as individuals that are involved in providing animal care services in the northern provinces as well as the territories. So to begin, I started with an internet search and the use of personal contacts within Veterinarians Without Borders to find the names of different organizations and individuals. I then found resources on these organizations, and this was often in the form of websites, but also blogs and social media profiles. And I then sent emails or made phone calls to fill in any missing data that I couldn't find online. From here, I then identified useful data from those resources, such as what species of animals the group is working with, how many animals they see per year and in total, which services the organization provides, how much time they spend working in the North, as well as the frequency of their work, which locations they're working in, if there was a fee associated with any service, what that cost was, as well as the contact information for those organizations. And from here, I entered the data and organized it into Excel in the format of a database. And I then performed statistics and created graphs using Excel as well. So to better visualize exactly where these different organizations are working, we set out to make a map, and this also includes a few other things on the map. So I started by locating, using Canadian 2016 census data, communities of 100 people or more within the 3 Canadian territories. And then I did an internet search to look for northern veterinary clinics within the northern parts of the provinces, as well as the 3 territories. And then I used Google Maps to determine the GPS coordinates of the locations that the different database organizations were working at, the coordinates of those northern veterinary clinics, as well as the coordinates of those communities of 100 or more people in the territories. Using these GPS coordinates and the QGIS computer software program, I created a map which showed the locations of all these different places. So the current version of the database includes 35 organizations that provide animal care services to 167 northern communities. And these communities are across 7 of the provinces, as well as all 3 of the Canadian territories. The database also includes 9 ancillary groups, which are associated with those main 35, and they provide things such as funding, as well as transportation, among others. The database also includes 35 northern veterinary clinics, 8 of which are located in the 3 territories, as well as the names, professions, and organizations of 188 people. This includes veterinarians, as well as registered veterinary technicians and other volunteers. After looking at the data statistically, we determined that approximately 58% of the different organizations worked for 5 weeks or more per year in Northern Canada, and less than 10% worked for less than a week per year within Northern Canadian communities. We also determined that approximately 88% of the organizations worked with at least one Northern Indigenous community at least once, as well as the services that were offered by the different organizations really varied, but the vast majority offered surgery, including sterilization, vaccination against common infectious diseases, parasite control, and physical exams. So this table outlines those services a little bit more completely. In the left-hand column, we have the different services that were provided, and in the right-hand column, you have the percentage of the organizations that actually provided that service. So you can see the ones I previously mentioned, surgery, vaccination, parasite control, and physical exam, were all offered by 90% or greater of the organizations. However, other services such as dental care and telehealth were offered by more like 20% of the different organizations.
Great. So I'm going to come in and talk about the numerical results that were looked at with some statistical analyses. Those were kind of the summarizations of the proportions, and so yes, no answers. So when you look at numbers, you have to do some kind of statistics. I'm not sure how familiar you are with these different terms in the different columns. But I'll maybe take a minute to just describe those very briefly, not painfully, hopefully. And and so that you understand what we're talking about here. So when you are trying to summarize numerical data, you want to have some kind of information about the average and then something about the spread of the numbers. When you are looking at the average, you can do what's called a mean, which is basically taking all of the years of service, adding them up, and then divided by the number of organizations, if we're talking about years of service in particular, and then you get what's called a mean. Now a median is where you would take all of those numbers of years of service and rank them from smallest to largest and then pick the middle one, and that would be the median. If you have a lot of really small or a lot of really large numbers of years of service, the median, which is that middle number, won't be affected by those really large or small numbers, but the mean will. So it's a good idea to actually show both if you can. Now there's different ways of describing the spread of the data as well. And so you can use the minimum and max, and that gives you a good starting point. But then if you again have really small or really large years of service, it doesn't really tell you the whole story. It doesn't tell you what kind of spread is common. So that's when we would use something like a standard deviation. And so what it shows you is the average difference between each year of service and the mean years of service. Okay, so it's again good to show both. So so there's the lesson that's done. I'll take my professor hat off again. So the years of service, as you can see, ranged from 3 to 41 with an organization in Quebec, Sept-Îles, Humane Society that had been around for 41 years. But there's quite a big range there. The average number of years was between 10 and 12, but you can see the variation is quite large, with that standard deviation being almost equal to the average. And so that usually suggests a big variation in the data. In terms of total animals seen, you can see it ranged from 250 in total over the number of years in existence to as many as 19,000. The 19,000 was actually the Northwest Territories Humane Society, or SPCA, I should say. The average was somewhere in 3,000 to 5,000 animals in total, and again, a really large standard deviation around that. In terms of animals seen per year, range was somewhere was 42 to 2,900. The 2,900 was the Humane Society in Welland, Niagara, in Ontario. The average number of animals seen per year was somewhere in the 300, 400, with again a pretty large standard deviation there. This next slide is showing the different organizations and their years of, their location and their work location, where they're from, where they're doing their work. The green bars are showing where they're based, and you can see that the territories don't have a large number there. The Nunavut on the right-hand side, Nunavut, Northwest Territories, and Yukon. And so the majority of these organizations are based in the provinces, with Ontario being the province with the highest number of organizations at 9, at least in our database as it currently sits. And I think there are some organizations on this conference that we don't have in the database. So it's an evergreen product database that will improve as we move forward. So that's where the organizations are based. It's not surprising that Ontario has the largest number. It's the biggest population province. When you look at the blue bars, that's showing where the organizations are primarily doing their work. And so you can see that it's kind of the opposite here, where the territories, and in particular Nunavut and Northwest Territories, have the majority of organizations where they're doing their work primarily. And some organizations are working in more than one location, so it doesn't actually equal the total number of organizations there. You can see that there are locations of work in the different provinces as well, and those would be in the northern parts of those provinces. And primarily it's where the base location is in that province. They're working in the northern part of that province. This slide is showing the different organizations, the 35, that are broken down by the different types of organizations. That font is a little small. I'm not sure how it got so small. It was bigger on our previous dry run of this, but anyways, hopefully you can still read that. We've got number of organizations on the y-axis and then the different organizations types on the x. And so there are 5 veterinary college. Each of the 5 vet schools in Canada have a program in place in either northern part of their province or in one of the territories. Then the yellow bar is talking about humane societies or SPCAs. And so there are 9 of those that we've got in the database now. The purple bar is showing 14 what we call other organizations that are also providing some kind of temporary vet clinic. And then in the database, we also have 7 organizations that are primarily rescue or rehoming organizations. Keep those colors in your memory, because this next slide is actually showing you where those different organizations are doing their work as far as we were able to figure out. So I'll take them one by one here. So you can see the red triangles are the vet schools. And so if you, hopefully you can see my cursor arrow, the University of Calgary Vet School is working primarily in the Northwest Territories, Sawtooth area up here. The Saskatoon Vet School is working in northern Saskatchewan and the La Ronge. The Ontario Vet School is planning to work in the northern Ontario area, Aroland. The Montreal Vet School is working in northern Quebec and James Bay area and other areas in northern Quebec. And then the PI Vet School is working in both Labrador and then has worked in some parts of Nunavut as well. You can see the yellow stars, and they're smattered all across the north, a lot of them in the northern provinces and Manitoba and Manitoba and Ontario, but there's some all across the country. The purple circles are representing those other organizations, and again, a lot of those going across the country from one end to the other. And predominantly in the northern parts of the provinces, but again, definitely some in the territories as well. And then we've got green boxes. I just noticed a mistake. We've got a blue box in the legend there. We originally had them blue, but we thought, well, that's not so easy to see with the blue water. So we turned them green, but we forgot to change the legend. We'll get that fixed. So the green boxes on the map are actually showing the locations where the rehoming and rescue organizations are doing their work predominantly. I've got red, I guess they're more like orange crosses that are, or big stars, however you want to describe them, that are actually the communities in the 3 territories that are 100 people or more in those communities. We didn't do this for the provinces because that would just get too busy and too difficult to see. So we left it with just the territories. And then the bottom icon there is the veterinary hospitals, the 35 vet hospitals. And so they're, again, located in the territories in Iqaluit, Yellowknife, and Whitehorse, and then in the northern parts of the different provinces. So this map really gives a lay of the land of what's happening, as far as we know, based on our work during this past summer. And again, we'll update it as we go forward. And I'm going to pass it back to Julia now.
So other results is when looking at the 2016 Canadian census data and which communities of 100 people or more. So we found that there were 74 and that most of these are geographically distant from the northern veterinary clinics we looked at. And of these 74, based on what we currently know in the database, 40 of these communities have partnered with at least one of our organizations in the database at least once. And that leaves, with our current knowledge, 34 communities within the 3 territories that have never had any animal care services available in their community. So this research has really demonstrated that there are a number of different clinics as well as organizations that work in Northern Canadian provinces as well as the 3 territories. However, many northern communities are outside of the catchment areas of full-time veterinary clinics as well as outside of the areas of many of the database organizations. It also showed that the types of animal care services, the frequency of work, as well as the costs really vary by organization as well as location. And it really emphasized that many remote communities within the 3 northern territories still have little to no access to veterinary care.
So I'm just going to finish off with a slide on the significance of the database. So we certainly were able to address our study objectives by clarifying who's providing animal care services and to what animals and how. We recognized that it was to the best of our knowledge and that we're probably missing some, so we will review this and edit it. We plan to share this database widely, and so that should hopefully allow for better coordination and collaboration with other animal care service providers currently offered in Northern Canada. In fact, we at Vets Without Borders are supporting another organization who can't get to the north this year because of COVID, and we have a team based in Yellowknife who can stay within that territory bubble, and so they're helping them out with that. With awareness of the services provided by the variety of organizations, and some organizations may decide to expand their services or to something more holistic or more sustainable, and that's also potentially a utilization of this database. And finally, it should allow us to better involve northern partners, including communities, governments, and existing veterinary services in decision-making and in animal care services. So hopefully this will provide all of those benefits to all on the call today and others who couldn't make the call today. Just a few references there, and then finally we're happy to take some questions that you might have.
Great. Thank you, John and Julia. That's super interesting to see the number of different clinics that have been happening. When you scan the comments, you'll see that it seems that there may be some missing, some communities missing, and some programs missing. So I'm sure that you can follow up with those attendees to see what that is. Anytime you put out data, you know somebody will find a hole in it. And there's also a request whether or not the map can be sent out to everyone. Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, sure. I don't see a problem with that at all. We can send it out as the current form, and then you can help us identify any omissions, and then we will update it as best we can. Perfect.
Excellent. I have a question for you. You looked at the service providers and how long they've been providing services. Did you flip that around and look at the communities and see how many years communities have been receiving services?
Julia, do you want to answer that?
Yes. So I have sort of preliminary data on that. A lot of the organizations that I was speaking to, some didn't, or with their sort of the understanding that they have with the different communities, they don't release some of their data, which is completely understandable. So it's sort of an incomplete data in terms of that, but I do have sort of preliminary data on I believe the question was how many years that an organization had been working in a community. Was that?
How many years had a community received veterinary services?
Right. Yeah, we have very incomplete data on that, but not anywhere near for all of the communities that I looked at. That makes sense.
And did you get any impressions as far as with organizations providing services? I know you've said you don't know exactly, but did you get an impression of if they were returning to the same communities every year, or if they were going different communities every year, or what was the general trend overall?
Yeah, great question. Some of the organizations that I spoke to, sort of in their central tenets, was going back to the same community in order to foster more of a holistic approach. So they had like good relationships with the community and would go back every year. And then sometimes speaking to that organization, they would say, you know, especially with sterilizations, you know, it'll be good for a few years, and then we get the request to come back and that sort of thing. And then there were definitely groups that sort of worked in different areas, not necessarily the same communities every time. It really varied by organization, especially some of the smaller ones were more limited by resources and personnel and often worked in the same community every year.
Great.
Just to add to that, I think one thing we could have done, but we sort of ran out of time at the end, was actually confirm with the communities that we are identifying as not having had any organization provide services to them, is that we could have contacted those communities and confirmed that indeed nobody actually has ever been there before. But Julia had to start school again, and so that hasn't been done at this point, but that would be something that we look to doing as well, just to make sure that this database is as accurate and complete as possible.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for that. And Julia, thanks for all your work this summer. It's great to see those things pulled together, because it does give us an idea, you know, what's happening on the landscape. I'm going to invite people to feel free to write questions in the chat line, but we will move forward right now to